And the reason I call myself a witch is because it is the word that my ancestors used. It's a Northern European word, and many of not my personal, but our common ancestors, of people of European descent, they were burned for their beliefs. They weren't allowed to practice their herbalism. They were demonized and ostracized, and quite a few of them were executed. So we live in times where it's actually safe to bring those teachings again and to embody that and to have that lifestyle and to openly be healers and practitioners. So by using that word, I honor my ancestors and I also demonstrate my loyalty to them. And the reason I call myself a forest witch is because of so much of what I do here in Sweden. It comes from the forest. The forest is my teacher. The beings in the forest are my teachers. Not a day passes without really learning something really significant.
Welcome to the Sacred Planet podcast. I am your host, Jocelyn Starfeather. We are living at the end of a massive 26,000 year cycle. This is a cycle that can be defined not astrologically, but astronomically by the movement of the North Star in the sky. Every 26,000 years, we come back to the original North Star. The times that we are living in now are when one of these 26,000 year cycles is ending and a new one is beginning. And so this is why this time when we are alive right now has been foretold in the ancient prophecies of many indigenous and ancient peoples all around the world, from almost every continent. This is why the world feels so chaotic, so uncertain, and so unstable right now, because we are truly shifting from one age, one massive 26,000 year age, into a new one. This is also why we are seeing so many changes in our own lives, so many changes in the world. It's because the systems and structures, the patterns and beliefs that we have been carrying for an extremely long time are collapsing. They are breaking down. And this is terrifying and also very exciting because those of us who are alive at this time, we get to choose what we will build next. We get to choose who we want to become in this new era. So it's really important to know during these times that these are actually not only ending times. This is not meant to be an apocalypse. This is actually meant to be the closing of a door to the old ways of being and the opening of a door to the new ways, to the radical new world that we are here to build together. We are here at this time, at this momentous time, to choose what will come next. And so let us dream into a world that our children and grandchildren and the next 7 generations will be delighted to inherit from us. And let's begin creating it one by one from within ourselves. That is where all change must begin, is from within every individual, and then it is rippled out to the world in miraculous and beautiful ways. Here in the Sacred Planet podcast, we will be talking about spiritual awakening. We will be talking about the massive changes that are happening in our world, and we will be talking most importantly about how you can support yourself, how you can feel most healed and healthy and whole and inspired and uplifted and ready to build this new world together, ready to choose who you wish to become next as all of the old falls away and we are left with a blank slate to create anything that we wish, anything that we dream into the future. Welcome to the Sacred Planet podcast. I can't wait to share the incredible speakers and topics that we'll be sharing here on the podcast, and I hope that it will be a tremendous inspiration to you in your own life. I am your host of the podcast. My name is Jocelyn Starfeather. I am the founder of Sacred Planet. Sacred Planet is a global community of people who are awakening to their true power and magic within and co-creating together and uplifting and inspiring one another as we build this radical new world together. I can't wait to share more with you. I'll see you soon in our next podcast episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Sacred Planet podcast. I am delighted to be here today with Imelda Almqvist. Welcome, Imelda. Thank you so much for being a part of the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's good to speak again.
Yeah, wonderful to talk to you again. It's been years since we last talked, so I'm really excited to dive into these topics and your beautiful work that you're doing. So let me share a little bit more about you with our audience here. Imelda Almqvist is an international teacher of sacred art and Old Norse traditions, the ancestral wisdom teachings of Northern Europe. So far, she has written 4 nonfiction books and 3 picture books for children. And I know I have just been so, really, my mind was opened when I read your book, Born Shamans, a Spiritual Toolkit for Life, about using shamanism creatively with young people. It's just incredible. I highly recommend that for everybody, and especially parents and grandparents. And Imelda is currently working on a handbook for rune magicians. The Green Bear is a series of magical picture books for children aged 3 to 8 years, set in Scandinavia. Imelda has presented her work on both the Shift Network and Sounds True. She appears in a TV program titled Ice Age Shaman, made for the Smithsonian Museum, in the series Mystic Britain, talking about Mesolithic Arctic deer shamanism. And she has a forest school in Sweden. Her online school is called Pregnant Hag Teachings. And in 2024, Imelda will teach a sacred art retreat in Greenland. That sounds really amazing. So Thank you, Imelda, for all of this beautiful work that you're doing. And it just all sounds so fun and creative. Yeah. So our topic for today is called Spiritual Fitness, the Daily Practices of a Norse Forest Witch. So could you begin by sharing with us, why do you call yourself a Norse Forest Witch, and what does that mean?
Yeah. Well, I'm talking to you from the forest. I'm in my house, which is also my school, here in the forest in Sweden by the Baltic Sea. And I'm enjoying a month of solitude. So I haven't seen another human being for about 10 days now, which is quite an amazing experience. And the reason I call myself a witch is because it is the word that my ancestors used. It's a Northern European word. And, many of, not my personal, but our common ancestors, of like people of European descent, they were burned for their beliefs. They weren't allowed to practice their herbalism. They were demonized and ostracized, and quite a few of them were executed. So we live in times where it's actually safe to bring those teachings again and to embody that and to have that lifestyle and to openly be healers and practitioners. So by using that word, I honor my ancestors, and I also demonstrate my loyalty to them. And the reason I call myself a forest witch is because of so much of what I do here in Sweden. It comes from the forest. The forest is my teacher. The beings in the forest are my teachers. Not a day passes without me learning something really significant, not paying really close attention, as the human voices have dropped away. During this time of solitude, I'm listening more closely to the voice of the wind and the birds and, like everything that goes on around me. So it is my great teacher, and I want to honor that.
Yes, that's so beautiful. So beautiful. And the solitude, I can only imagine how, deeply you go into the liminal realms, and having that kind of solitude for an extended period of time. So that's really beautiful. I would love to go first here to this idea of our young people and what our young people are going through in the world right now, and how connecting with shamanism or shamanic practices or indigenous wisdom can be supportive for them. I wonder if you would mind saying a few words about that as we get started.
Always happy to talk about that subject as a mother of 3 sons. And yeah, I observed that our young people live in a world that was already changed completely when I myself grew up. So my husband and I have agreed that we can never say to our children anymore, when I was your age, because these comparisons fail completely. So we've actually agreed to never say that to them again. But also the world has been changed by a pandemic, by the internet. Now we have AI arriving on the scene, and also there's a war playing out in Europe. And Russia is just across the water here. I'm actually very close to Russia. It's just across the sea. So, so there is that awareness as well. And I think that young people need a spiritual toolkit more than ever. And my free gift for this interview is actually a free workshop people can do in my online school. And I recorded that about a year ago. And it gives a lot of practical pointers where young people are at and where we can meet them, and also how we can talk to them about their own spiritual belief system while giving them the space to develop their own belief system. But, in my kind of work, it's always putting spirit at the very heart of things. And in a way, I think that's the greatest gift you can give to children. If they can form that connection, whatever expression that takes for them, and however much it changes later on in life, if they have that connection to spirit, they always have that dialogue and they have that guidance. And I also think that more needs to be done for young people, because the rates for diagnosed mental health, mental illness, are extreme at the moment. We also live in a world that puts a lot of pressure on young people, where young people now compare themselves with unrealistically beautiful people on Instagram who use filters and have their pictures photoshopped. So a lot of people now feel that they fall short of the perfect lifestyle or the perfect looks or all of those things. So there's a lot going on there. And I don't think it's possible for all young people who need it to receive, professional mental health support. I think, unfortunately, that's only going to be for the most severe cases where medical referrals are made. And even then, the waiting times are very long. At least in Europe, they are. I don't know what's like in other parts of the world. So, and I've really thought about this a lot, observing young people and working with them. And I think the best idea I can come up with is that we create mentoring systems where people from any walk of life, and they don't need to be parents, but people who have the ability to reach out to a child, do that for just one young person. You can't change the world, but you could maybe just change the life of one young person a little bit. And that could take many different ways. It could be being a good listener, non-judgmental, unconditional listening. Some children, sometimes need a good meal or a bed for the night or a safe place where they can go when things get difficult at home. Or, a person they can talk to about what's happening in school, maybe like bullying or other pressures. There are a lot of people with gender dysphoria at the moment, whom I believe also need others that they can speak to. So it is my belief, if those people who have something to offer and who have the space, would find a way of mentoring a young person, ideally close by, maybe sometimes you connect with them online, but ideally, if at all possible, in person, then research by psychologists shows that even children who have a lot of adverse experiences in life and who move through a lot of trauma, if there's just one responsible adult in their life, neighbor, uncle, coach, teacher, whatever the person is, whatever role they're in. But if there's the support and the stability of that one person they can connect with, it makes significant change to the outcome of the rest of their lives. They end up doing much better because they have that support, and also they can internalize that. They know what that looks like, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yes, that makes so much sense. That makes so much sense. And there are so many young people that, for whatever reason, can't turn to their parents or don't have their parents available to them. Right. And also, it helps for young people to have someone other than their parents. Even if they do have a good relationship with their parents, they might need someone else to turn to for some of the things that come up in life or some of the things they're dealing with. So this is such a beautiful, powerful idea. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. I do think I have daughters who are 9 and 12 now. And I do see some hope in the way that so many of the movies and the new just concepts that are very widespread and familiar to kids right now involve, things like spirit animals and connecting with our ancestors and, and understanding that we have family out in the stars, that these aspects of the earth are alive, not just for us to, appropriate and make use of. So I really do think there's a shifting of consciousness happening among the young people as well. It's, of course, it's happening at all levels of our collective human society. But that gives me a lot of hope. I know my girls have found it very easy to relate to the idea of spirit animals and these kind of things, and to see, and their friends do too. It's not just my kids, because I introduced them to that. It's, they can talk about these things with their friends, and it's pretty normal. And it may not be true for all kids everywhere, but I think it's growing. I think that's really becoming more available. So that's positive. Yeah.
And it's become more cool as well. My own sons will sometimes bring friends home and say, "Oh, is it okay for them to just talk to you about shamanism for a bit? Or can they just like ask you some questions?" And of course, I always say yes, because that's part of my, that's something I can do in the world. And like you, I observe that. Though I probably still think it's more available to children who have a kind of, stable and good upbringing to start with. And it may be less available to those who really struggle. But even so, it's fantastic to see that it's becoming like cool and accepted, and you can talk about it in public. And it's a wonderful thing.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So looking at another stage of life now, I know that you have spoken about the wisdom years as aging gracefully and eldering playfully. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Of course. Yeah, that's like my time of life. I am 56 now, and I observe that we live in a society that is in total death denial. So death is like sanitized and kept away from view. And also we're obsessed with youth and looking young and, like preserving youth at all cost, almost to a silly and, inappropriate extent. And it's not only what we do for ourselves, but it goes back to the young people as well. Like, what example do we set for young people if we sort of embody those obsessions in our life? So I feel very strongly that to grow older is a privilege. And I hope to be on the planet for more years, even more decades, hopefully. And I think rather than putting a lot of energy into sort of, trying to make a younger impression, I think, why don't I accept the privilege that I am the age I am? And step deeper into that role we just discussed of like mentoring and being there for others, but also, trying to live by spiritual values that are realistic and that hopefully model some kind of spiritual compass in life. That's the way I try to parent my own children, also the way I try to be, as I said, when, my children bring young people home, or when I'm in situations where I interact with young people, to sort of, show that there is a different way of doing this. And I think an enormous part of that is also, and that's a key thing in shamanism, but that is to make death our friend or our ally. So to not live in fear of death, but to allow the fact we're going to die one day to absolutely inform every moment we have on the planet. And if you really do that, and I do it as a daily practice, to think, well, visit that moment of my death briefly, then I come back with huge gratitude that I'm healthy and around today. And then I look at the things that bother me or that are on my to-do list, and I think, well, like, what is urgent and what is important? Do I keep my priorities straight? And every once in a while I rethink that completely, I revision that completely, and I realize like things I need to release from my life, so I have more time and energy for what really matters. And these are some of the gifts of working actively with death and trying, and I'm still young for it. I think, I can't really do it until I'm in my 60s. I'm an aspiring elder, but very much hope to be an elder one day, embodying those kinds of values in the world.
Yes. Yes. I love it when I, see people celebrating a birthday in their 50s or 60s or 70s or beyond, and saying, "Oh, I'm so grateful that I'm alive. I'm so grateful to have, accumulated these years." And it's such a gift, it's such a gift. And certainly our ancient, ancestors and previous ancient generations appreciated the elderhood, and knew that we need to turn to our elders. We need to have that wisdom, and that it's like libraries of wisdom that can be in the mind and the consciousness of the elders in the community. And I just think this is something we need to bring back. We need to remember. We need to value and honor once again. So yes.
Yeah, and also modeling that not all of life needs to be lived from an egoic state. The human ego is important because it's the organizing principle. So if we need to get our car washed, or we need to get from A to B. I mean, we absolutely need to have our ego in here. I sometimes have students who say, I'm going to spend the rest of my life in like non-egoic unity consciousness, but that'd be very impractical because you wouldn't like hold down the, the other parts of your life. But I think to model for young people, to give them that tool of a spirit-led life and to sort of teach them that there are these some very mildly altered states of consciousness where you really feel that spirit works through you and spirit flows through you. It can inform what you do. And also, that does take you back to a state of unity consciousness with the divine. And also that quickly takes us out of thinking that, like little me is the most important person on the planet. That's like not the case. And if you can you can live in that way, then immediately your priorities start shifting. And I'm just a bit concerned if I look at young people, that, again, psychologists run these polls and ask young people what they want to be when they grow up. And, a shocking number of them now say they want to be Instagram influencers. And it's like, well, that's all very well. We need to have some of those. But, I think something has come off kilter in our culture if that is what most young people aspire to. So I think a dose of spirit-led work will counterbalance that quite nicely.
Right. Yes, that's a bit shocking. I hadn't heard that.
Yeah.
But I can see it. Yes. Well, could you share with us about a practice that you have that you call waking the skulls?
Yeah, waking and walking both, because I collect skulls. I was in Shetland recently and, brought home a whole a suitcase full of skulls. I was leaving clothing and shoes behind so I could bring the skulls home. And also here at my forest house, I have a deer skull, I have a moose skull, seal skull, and skulls from other animals as well. And it is a spiritual belief that many indigenous peoples have or had as well, that when an animal dies, the soul of the animal would fly free, but that the skull still holds a kind of essence or a kind of wisdom that we can tap into. I guess that's why I like skulls so much. So I have all of these skulls and I arrange them on altars and I talk to them and, so sometimes make offerings, not to the skulls themselves, but to the larger sort of great cosmic powers that they represent. And one of the things I do is that I take them on walks in the forest. I can't take them all at the same time. Like one of them is like a bear skull as well. I was gifted a bear skull once, which is wonderful. So I couldn't hold them all at the same time because some of them are really big. But every once in a while I select a few, however many I can carry, and I take them on the walk in the forest. And it's also a gift back to the animal that gave me the skull. That is, I get to experience the place where they came from, and that I get to be out in the fresh air. And I do ceremony with them and I speak prayers or, I'll play instruments. Sometimes I'll bring a musical instrument as well. It depends on how many things I can carry. But for instance, the moment I've been playing my swan bone flute a lot. So I'll bring skulls and play swan bone flute. And it's giving something back, connecting them back to the forest and the universal power. And then I bring them home again. And a lot of people think that's a very sort of strange practice. But when I talk about it, people think, oh, that is quite nice. I could imagine myself doing that. So that's one of my, not daily, but that's one of my regular practices.
Oh, how fascinating. Yes. For some reason, as you were sharing about that, I was just seeing the cave paintings, the Chefo and Lasso cave paintings, and just feeling that honoring, as you're working with the skull, honoring the animal, and those cave paintings, they feel so honoring of the animal. So that's really interesting. I'm going to ponder that. That's really beautiful. Now you work with runes as well, and I understand you're working on a rune handbook for magicians. Is that right?
Well, it's 2 handbooks actually, because it became so much material. I had to chop it into 2 books, and I was working on that today. I'm trying to get it to the final editing stage. Hoping to be there by Christmas, really. I have so much teaching to do and a lot of travel. But yeah, the runes are very much, as a Nordic or a Northern tradition practitioner, someone who teaches Seiðr. They're at the very core of what I do. And here in Sweden, I myself have painted rune stones, so not the rune stones that are like tomb or memorial stones, but I found quite big rocks in the forest and painted the runes on them, and I've laid them out in the form of a circle, so they're like in all directions as well. And every morning I step outside my front door and I chant the runes. And as I chant the runes, I feel these homemade runes that like they ping back at me, they check in with me. And then also by chanting the runes, because one rune teaching is that by teaching all the runes, that's the runes of the elder Futhark mostly. Though as a Dutch person, I also work with the Frisian runes, but now talking about the runes of the elder Futhark. There is a belief that if you chant all the runes, you're kind of calling something back to divine perfection, because you're calling in all of these, occult powers, as it were. So after I've chanted the runes, then, I feel that the space around me is sacred space. I'll close my arms, and that then becomes my prayer bowl. So the next thing I do is, I speak all my prayers for people who are on my prayer list, or, people in my family who need some support, or, people who have like contacted me even on social media or email, hold so and so in prayer. So that all goes, inside that circle of the runes, and I hold them all in prayers. And then I speak a few more like old Norse prayers, and then I start my day.
Beautiful, beautiful. What do you think it is that that draws us to the runes? They feel so important as a part of our history and our lineage. But yeah, what do you think is just extra powerful about the runes?
Well, I think because they are far more than letters. I mean, in the Viking era, they were absolutely used as letters. So that is like their primary purpose. But they were also used in magical workings. And I think the thing with the runes is also that, all the centuries, so there was also a kind of dark age during witch hunts where they almost fell out of use. Not completely, they were still used in the countryside, but it became a very no thing to use them. But still, all in all, many centuries of people working with the runes that like accumulates into an energetic field that you tap into. So I'm almost aware that when I do my personal work with the runes, and also that work needs to be reinvented the whole time, because we live in different times from the Vikings. The Vikings didn't have to deal with the internet or, artificial intelligence, but they had a lot of other challenges that we don't face anymore. So there's always a process of evolving and arriving at a new way of working. But also the awareness that by working with the runes, I tap into a larger field, a larger body of knowledge that all of these people who came before me, my rune magician ancestors, have contributed to. And that, if I do that in a place of deep honoring and respect, some of these insights start filtering through. So then it's not just the runes anymore, there's no only, but in the sense of that, either wooden discs or pebbles that have symbols on them. But for me, it also goes many, many centuries back. And for my book, I've even been looking if the links can be linked to an earlier time, like say the Bronze Age period in Scandinavia, or so the kind of symbols that people painted in caves. And here we have a lot of petroglyphs in Scandinavia, also here on the doorstep. So I'm also quite intrigued by though we have no proof for it, but there are quite strong resemblances between some of the symbols we find in rock art, in petroglyphs in Scandinavia, and then these runes. So that's the thing I've been exploring for my book. And so for me, when I work with the runes, and also all the rune readings I've done before, all the people I've worked with, all the rune magician students who've shared their own insights, it's like this huge body of work. And all of that activates and comes to life when I myself work with the runes.
Yes, amazing, amazing. That it's somewhat like the Egyptian hieroglyphs that hold so many levels of meaning. Yes, they as writing, and they could write, whatever texts they needed to, but there are so many more layers and so many more connections and codes in there. So it feels similar. Yeah, it's really beautiful. Yeah, I'm curious about the sacred sites of the ancient Norse people. We hear a lot about Stonehenge, and we hear a lot about Egypt and, Greece and these kinds of things. But what are the sacred sites of the far north?
Oh, there are many, because here in Sweden, the land is so littered with standing stones and rune stones. And well, not so much stone circles. Here in Scandinavia, standing stones were erected in a ship shape, and that's called the skeppssättning in Swedish. So it means the stone standing in a ship formation, and that's related to beliefs they have about the afterlife. Because some people, like only really prominent, like warriors or chieftains, were buried in ships, where they would dig down, make a huge grave, and a whole wooden ship would go down. And people would call the grave goods as well. And so archaeologists have dug that up, and we've learned a lot from that. So that's like one thing, that they have these so-called skeppssättningar, these ship formation stones. An incredible amount of petroglyphs. The bulk of them here in Sweden are on the west coast in Vitlycke and Tanumshede, so just south of like where the border with Norway is. But we are on the east coast facing the Baltic Sea, and we have petroglyphs here on the east coast as well, a considerable number of them. So we have the standing stones, we have the petroglyphs, we have grave mounds that belong to ancient kings and chieftains. And the nearest one near my forest school here is called Uppsakule, which is an old sort of mound. And, I sit out there with my students. So we sit out for a night or part of a night, like on the grave mounds. And, it's all very, very beautiful, unless it rains. But that's an established Scandinavian way of communicating with ancestors, that you go sit on a grave mound, I said often at night and in solitude. And the idea then is that your sort of ancestors will come and talk to you. And there are like many other, Scandinavia has so many places, like so many what we call fornlämningar, these sort of ancient sites from, some are from the Bronze Age, but some are even earlier, from like the Iron Age. So for people who are interested in those kinds of things, I mean, it's practically like every few kilometers you can stop and look at something. And then, of course, we have the rune stones as well with their inscriptions. So it's like unlimited wherever you go. I think Sweden, is the heartland of it, because Norway is more mountainous. Finland has beautiful things as well, and a lot of rock art as well. But, Finland is not part of Scandinavia. It's part of the Nordic region, but it's not a Scandinavian country. But if you were to tour all of these countries, you can see a truly amazing amount of ancient things. And I think also being on that ancient land, then I teach at my forest school. I get a lot of people who have Scandinavian ancestors, but who are, have grown up in like third generation American or Canadian or wherever they come from. And there is something about bringing them back to the sacred land, visiting these places. And like one of my students once said that, I can hear the ancestors sing in my blood. It's such a powerful thing to return and be on that land. So yeah, it's a powerful experience.
That's so powerful. Yes. I hear the ancestors sing in my blood. That's incredibly powerful. Yes. Wow. Thank you for sharing about that. I think, I want to put those sites on my list as well of places to see. It's so interesting. My 9-year-old daughter wants to go to Sweden. She's told me for years now she wants to go to Sweden. So I feel like I don't believe we have any Swedish in our ancestry, but she's very connected and she wants to go. So yeah.
Well, there you go. You will get here.
Yes. Could you tell us as well about the Mesolithic Arctic deer shamanism? And what is important for us to know about that?
Well, that was part of a TV program that was made for the Smithsonian Museum, and and it's like that program was about Ice Age shamanism, and it focused on Starkar. That's a site in the UK, actually near the city of York. So it's not in Sweden. We're now talking about UK. And that was like a TV program where the idea was that I would take the presenter on a shamanic journey to see if to just spend time at Starkar, more from an intellectual point of view, if I could take him into the zone where he had his own impressions of that. And, he had some impressions. It's quite hard work to get him there, but, we got there in the end. And yeah, it's another of these really early sites, and also where a lot of antlers have been found. So they had a strong connection to deer. And of course, the Sami people have their reindeer, and the Inuit have their caribou. So there's this whole circumpolar tradition of deer shamanism, in the sense of that there are coherent shamanic practices associated with deer as like a key animal that people like hunted, but they did far more than hunting, because they also depended for their lives on these animals. So they had a very intimate relationship with these animals. It's not like, oh, you just buy your meat wrapped in plastic in the supermarket. But, people who depended on these animals actually had a very, very intimate relationship with these animals, where their own fate was tied up with these animals. And they also felt a really strong responsibility to sort of, handle them well and to deal with the remains of the animals really well. Because the idea is that you stayed on good terms and that you would sort of, appease in the soul of the animal. Might be unhappy it got hunted, or maybe it offered itself, different beliefs around that, but you wanted to do it all in a very good spirit, so the animal would choose to be born again. And so there would be like deer and animals and transport and all of those things in the future as well. And the reindeer herders, the Sami people up north here in Arctic Scandinavia, they still do that. They still live that lifestyle.
Yeah, I love that. It's this focus that we have so forgotten in our modern culture, but about ensuring the continuance of life, right? These rituals and offerings and different actions, very simple things really that we can do to ensure the continuance of life, like you said, to ensure that that deer gets born again into a good new life.
Yeah, but also giving back to what gives us life, to not just take for granted that other beings are going to die. And I'm even talking about plants, and you could be a vegan and try to eat a vegan diet at the moment. But even for me to eat, like, plants still have to die and give up their lives so that I can eat. And that's one of the great ontological dilemmas for human beings, that for us to live, something else has to give up its life and die. So we're back to the death topic, I'm afraid. But that can only really be done in a relationship of deep honoring and trying to give something back, and sort of, managing that with the greatest respect, and also with ritual and ceremony.
Yes, yes. Is there anything else that you wanted to say about this idea of making death our ally? I know you mentioned it a little bit earlier. What else do we need to know about that? Feels so important in our time. And working with Egypt, I have Anubis right here.
Yes, you do.
These ancient cultures, we're so deeply in touch with that, accepting both, right? Life and death together. It's all part of our experience. We cannot have one without the other. And we try to run away from death, for sure, in our culture. So what would you say about that? How can we improve that relationship?
Well, I think what I would say about that is that then I just tell people what I do there with the daily practice. And the initial reaction, oh, that's like so morbid. Like, I'm not going to die today. Well, you can never be sure about that. You could literally die any moment. But, okay, maybe statistically it's unlikely. But what people, I think, do not realize is that then you have a practice like that, and it becomes as natural as breathing. It's such a positive thing. It's a wonderful thing when you start dropping your fear of death, and you can sort of be in the world without being on the run from death. And just a few days ago, I'd done a little pen and ink sketch, about that concept of contemplating my own death. So it shows like a huge oversized skull, and then I'm kneeling in front of it, looking into the eyes of the skull. And I put that on social media because of a daily art post. And I thought that, people wouldn't like it at all, because people usually don't like anything to do with death. So I shared the post on social media, and it got a huge number of reactions where people said, oh, that is so beautiful, I'm going to try that. And maybe it also helped to have the picture up. And people were sort of sharing like the role that death had played in their lives, and how their lives had improved once they had realized that, because also in our culture, we're so self-centered and ego-focused, that even when people die at a really good age, we still sort of think, oh, they lose a battle with a disease, or like it would be a personal like insult, or it would be offensive to die. And actually, death is actually the natural outcome of being alive. Death is the sacred twin of life. So it's the bookends of birth and death. And I think, and then, you see that in our society as well. There are like people who have a terminal disease and, will ask to have another round of chemotherapy when it's very, very clear that the work that really needs to be done is death preparation work. And that's another thing as part of my shamanic practice that, for many years I've done with people and still do, but where you actually work with people who know that death isn't too far off. And then you start like working on actively creating a good death. And one of these things is that you can use shamanic techniques such as shamanic journeys to already have people visiting their death, where you can already like take them to the land of the dead and sort of meet their ancestors and have a brief visit, and then they can come back. And then people can have explicit wishes for how they want that to go. You can ask for allies to come forward. You can sort of, it sounds a bit strange maybe, but you can actually make an arrangement. You can agree for you can start working with a death ally long before you die and ask that being is going to be there in your moment of death, depending on your cosmology. It could be an angel, it could be an animal. For one woman I worked with, it was a whale. So we like made this made this agreement with the spirit of the whale that when her time came, the whale would come and sort of take her. And she was a musician, so there was going to be a lot of music involved as well. And she called that idea from a painting I had made about my own death, saying she wanted to work with that more. And so death is not just something that like whooshes over you and that you're powerless. Yes, you're powerless. You don't get, unless you commit suicide, which I don't recommend, you don't get to choose the day or the time of your death. But other than that, we're not powerless. We have our whole lifetime where we can already start actively working with that. And as I said, see it as an ally and a friend, rather than, being in denial, thinking it's not going to happen, if those suggestions make sense.
Yes. I love that idea of making the agreement that this being will come and be with you. Because I think that's one of the fears, right? Is that we'll feel so alone in that moment. We'll feel like we're leaving everybody and everything we've known. And that's a big part of it. So to know that this being like the whale is going to come and be there and guide you and be a part of that process. That's really beautiful. It's really comforting.
It really helps, but also, there will always be what we call psychopons or soul conductors. I don't think any death is ever unattended. But also sometimes when people die a shocking or violent or unexpected death, they're not like immediately open to that. And that's like, of course, a sudden, unexpected, accidental death is a different thing again from a death that you have prepared for and that you see coming. I mean, I understand that. But, these beings will be there always. And, another thing that's really good is connecting with the ancestors. Or like I've already sort of done journeys where this was just a reference I saw in an anthropological text from Siberia, where it was said there is like a particular river that is in this world, so it's geographical, but then it leads into the other world. And that old people who have been shamans in life, they sort of live in a little hut by the river on the other side. And I thought it was such a beautiful idea. And I don't call myself a shaman, I call myself a forest witch, but I actually traveled on that river and created myself a little hut, and I go there sometimes and I put pictures on the wall and I already prepare it, sort of thinking that I already have a home in the afterlife, in the land of the ancestors, and it's by a river, and that's where I'm going to go. So you can work with death in really positive ways.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing these insights with us. Yeah. Let's see. I have one more question for you, and that is for those listening who may be maybe not doing any shamanic practices yet, or maybe be somewhere, fairly new on their journey of spiritual awakening. What would you recommend to get started if they're very interested in what you're saying here, in connecting in with, the shamanic realms or the unseen realms? What is an amazing, starting practice that people can begin with?
Well, I actually think learning how to do shamanic journeying, as it's called, it's a technique from core shamanism, is very, very good. And that's like something, I don't practice core shamanism anymore, but that's something I've kept because it works so well. I've worked with children, I've had many students, I use it myself. So if I had to single out one practice, I think that's a very good one. I'd also pay attention to dreams. I would connect with like-minded people, so you're like not alone. Your everyday life, you may just be surrounded by people who are not open to what you want to explore. It's really important to have people around you who support that. And also, I think sooner or later, I think finding a teacher who resonates with you, who's in alignment with what you want to learn. People often say, oh, but can't I learn everything on my own? I think you can learn a lot on your own, yes, but the teacher can sort of help you accelerate things, and the teacher can also be a mentor who helps you do things safely. And if you're really going to be dealing with the other world, you're going to discover that not everything in the world of spirit is good. I mean, there are like parts of the world of spirit where, more troubled beings are and live. So, also like learning some good tools for like doing it all safely and coming back. And, so it's like a fully grounded practice. That's where I think, finding a teacher can be a good thing.
Yes.
And books, of course, there are fantastic books out there.
Yes. And your books, for sure.
My books especially, of course.
Yes, of course. Yes. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for this, Imelda. And I know you have a wonderful free gift for us. So could you tell our audience a little bit more about that free gift and what they'll receive?
Yeah, of course. You already talked earlier about like post-pandemic support for young people in a time of great paradigm shifts. So my free gift is a link for that workshop in my online school. So that's Pregnant Hack Teachings. And that's like a 2-hour workshop where I take people through very basic spiritual tools and things to think about and to be mindful of if you want to play a kind of mentoring or supportive role in the life of young people. I sort of like mapped a bit. I've like talked to a lot of other practitioners and colleagues and people in different fields. So started by mapping what is going on, what are young people struggling with. And then I sort of looked at, okay, and what are the shamanic tools you can use to sort of, like handle that or mitigate that and make things better. So it's like a free 2-hour workshop. Anyone can attend it in their own time by watching the recording in my school. And hopefully take something away that's useful. So I hope that people listening will try that.
Yes, what a fantastic free gift. And I can just see the ripples of support and good, results going out into the world from everybody, learning that material and learning more about what they can do to support our young people. So thank you so much for offering that.
I hope so. Thank you. Yes.
Yes. And thank you, Imelda, for this wonderful time together and this beautiful conversation. I've learned so much. So thank you for your time and your wisdom. It's always wonderful to speak with you.
Thank you for having me and for your questions.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful day.
You too.
To everybody out there in the Sacred Planet audience, much love to you. And I'll see you again soon in the next interview. Blessings. I hope you've enjoyed this wonderful episode of the Sacred Planet podcast. Be sure to click like and subscribe to our channel so that you will receive future updates. You'll know when we go live and when we are publishing the new episodes. And also be sure to put a note in the comments. What did this episode mean to you? What did this speaker and this topic inspire and awaken in you? And how do you want to share that with the world in new ways going forward? I would love to hear in the comments. And while you're here, go ahead and click on another podcast episode and open your mind, open your heart to more beautiful wisdom from the podcast. Much love, everybody.